Let's start by looking at invoking our service directly through the API using our public API gateway endpoint that we've connected. So one of the webhook integrations Slack provides is to allow you to, whenever a particular keyword is mentioned in a channel, post that message to some external URL that you've registered. So I've started to set up a new outgoing webhook. So this is for the weather channel, and the trigger word is weather. And then any of the URLs that are registered here will get a HTTP request whenever someone sends that message with the data in. I've used an API gateway service, API Connect on IBM Bluemix, to be able to set up a public endpoint that will then call the authenticated HTTP post for the API for OpenWhisk to invoke my service with that data. So once we've saved that outgoing webhook integration, we should be able to go back to Slack and then start to request forecasts on demand. So I can save my outgoing webhook, and now in Slack I can say the trigger words and an address, and hopefully my service should be invoked and it should give us the forecast back into the channel from WeatherBot. There we go, right, partially clouded, that sounds about right. And we could try it for any location, so we can try it for Lviv in the Ukraine, and that should also work. Great, that was easy, right? We've used API gateways and the direct invocation to be able to allow users to request forecasts in the channel. And the next thing we'd like to do is to have our service respond to kind of asynchronous events. And we said the way to do this in OpenWhisk is to use triggers, right? Triggers allow you to model external events from the outside world and have your services automatically invoked, right? So when there's a message on a queue, when there's a database update, you can have your services kind of react to those accordingly. We can create them directly through the command line using the utility. So you can see we've got no triggers registered at the moment. So let's create a new one called sample trigger. And then we can bind this to our action using a rule. So whenever that trigger is fired, that action is automatically invoked. So I create a new rule, binding my trigger to my action. I need to enable my rule to make it live within the platform. And now I should be able to fire my trigger and automatically have the action invoked. So I'm going to pass in a parameter, obviously, which is the address that we want to look up the forecast for. And hopefully we should see in Slack a notification because our WeatherBot has been activated on demand. And that's how you can obviously create triggers manually and fire them. But what we'd like to do is then have our trigger listen to some kind of external event source. And we do this in OpenWhisk through what we call trigger feeds. And you can have trigger feeds to connect triggers to external systems for databases or for message queues. But what I'd like to do is have my WeatherBot executed on demand whenever in the morning or according to a regular schedule. So this is an example of using what they call the alarm feed, which allows you to execute a trigger according to a pre-specified schedule, right? You're passing in a cron sub specification, so you could have your system firing every hour, every day, every week. And there's an example down the bottom of creating a new trigger that actually fires every 8 seconds. So let's try that out and copy that into our terminal. So we get to pass in the payload we want the trigger to be fired with, which is controlled by the trigger feed. And we're going to give it obviously the address of the place we want to look at the forecast for. And there we go, right? Once the trigger's been created, it should in the platform be activated every 8 seconds. So all we have to do is create a new rule which binds that trigger every 8 seconds to our location forecast service. And then hopefully that will be automatically called by the platform according to this regular schedule. So hopefully in a couple of seconds time we should get a new notification in Slack showing us that our trigger has been fired. So there we go, right? Now we have our bot being fired according to a kind of regular schedule on demand. And you can use these trigger feeds to connect your services to databases or to message queues, to any kind of asynchronous event source.